My graduation photo sits on my desk at work, just me in a black robe holding a diploma, squinting a little because the sun was in my eyes. No family behind me. No one to fix my hood before the photographer counted down. Just me and a stranger who offered to take the picture because she could tell I was alone. I don't cry when I look at it anymore. But for a long time, I couldn't even put it in a frame. Before I tell you what happened after I walked out of that house for the last time, and what my brother's life looks like now compared to mine, I want to ask you something. Drop it in the comments. What time is it where you're watching this? And have you ever shown up to your own milestone completely alone because the people who were supposed to be there decided someone else mattered more? I'll get to the end. But first, you need to understand what I was working with. My name is Nat. I'm 29 now. When this story starts, I was 22, 3 weeks from finishing a 4-year accounting degree that took me 5 years to complete, and the extra year wasn't because I failed anything. It was because, when I was a junior, my parents quietly redirected the college fund my grandfather had left specifically for me, redirected it to cover my brother Cody's latest disaster, and didn't tell me until I went to register for my fall semester and the payment didn't go through. I remember sitting in my car in the campus parking garage on hold with the bursar's office, thinking there had to be a mistake. There was no mistake. Cody was 24 at the time and had already cycled through 2 semesters at community college, a trade program. He quit after 6 weeks, and a business idea involving protein powder that I still don't fully understand. He needed money. There was a debt involved. I never got the full story. My mother was vague in the particular way she got vague whenever the subject was Cody. And so my grandfather's money, the money set aside for my education because my grandfather believed in me specifically, was gone. My mother cried when she told me. She cried and she said she was sorry, and then in the same breath she said, "You're so capable, Nat. You'll figure it out. You always do." Like my competence was the reason it was acceptable to take from me. Like being the kid who doesn't fall apart is a punishable offense. I figured it out. I picked up a second job. I cut my course load so I could work more hours and stretched my last year into 2. I graduated in May, a year late, with a degree I paid for myself and a tiredness in my bones that I'm honestly not sure ever fully went away. My parents knew the graduation date for months. I sent the information twice. My mother confirmed they would be there. She said my aunt was coming from out of town. She said my father, my stepfather, technically, the only dad I'd known since I was 4, was going to take the day off work. 3 days before the ceremony, my mother called me. Cody had gotten into something. She wasn't specific. There was a situation with a landlord and money owed and apparently some threat of legal action, and my stepfather needed to be there to help sort it out, and she couldn't very well come alone because she didn't like driving the highway and she was so sorry, she really was. But surely I understood. I understood. I said I understood. I said it very quietly and very clearly, and I told her I had to go, and I hung up. I sat on my apartment floor for about an hour, not crying, just sitting. My roommate came home and I told her what happened, and she looked at me with so much pity that I had to look away. I hate being pitied. I've been pitied my whole life. The responsible one, the sensible one, the one who can handle it, and pity never once helped anything. I went to my graduation alone. I asked my roommate's boyfriend to take a photo on the lawn afterward. He was kind about it. He took about 15 different angles, good lighting, really tried. I smiled in all of them. I looked fine. What I felt like inside is not something I know how to describe quickly. It was something old and something very tired and something that had been waiting for years for me to finally just admit it. This is not going to change. They are not going to change. You have been waiting for a version of your family that does not exist. I drove home, changed out of my robe, packed 2 suitcases, put them in my car, and called my mother. She answered on the second ring. She asked how the ceremony was. She said she felt terrible about missing it. She started to tell me about Cody's situation, how complicated it was, how stressful, how much he needed support right now. I let her finish. Then I said, I want you to know that I love you, and I want you to know that I've been waiting my entire life for you to show up for me the way you show up for him. I've been patient, I've been understanding, I've been capable, and I'm done. I'm not angry, I'm just done. She started to speak and I said, I need you to hear me, not respond to me. I'm not calling to fight. I'm calling because I think you deserve to know before you hear it through other ways. I'm going to take some space. I don't know how much. I'll reach out when I'm ready. I hung up. I picked up my 2 suitcases. I stayed with my roommate for 2 weeks, then moved into a small studio on the other side of the city. I didn't give my mother the new address. I want to be honest about what that period was like, because I've seen stories like mine cleaned up into this triumphant narrative. I left and everything was immediately better, and that's not true. The first month was genuinely terrible. I'd wake up at 2 in the morning with this anxious spiral running through my head. What if I'm wrong? What if I'm being cruel? What if this Cody actually needed that money in a way I'm not understanding? What if my mother is falling apart right now because I'm gone? I had a therapist. She was the one who asked me, very calmly during one of those sessions, when you imagine your mother falling apart without you, who takes care of her in that scenario? Does Cody? Does your stepfather? Or does she eventually call you and you come back? I knew the answer before she finished the sentence. The thing about being the capable kid is that your family builds infrastructure around your capability. You become the emotional load-bearing wall. When something is hard, they lean on you. When something goes wrong, they call you. When Cody needed money, they took it from you because you, unlike Cody, would find a way to be okay. I was never actually fine. I was just cheaper to neglect. That's the thing no one says out loud, the scapegoat kid. And I don't love that term, but I understand why people use it. Isn't the one who causes problems. They're the one whose stability gets mined to solve everyone else's problems, and they get praised for it, which makes it even more confusing. You're so strong. You're so capable. We don't worry about you. Translated, we have decided your needs are optional. I went no contact for about 8 months. During that time, I got promoted at my job. I'm an audit. Not glamorous, I know, and I'd been passed over for a senior analyst position the year before because I'd been too stretched thin between work and school to put in the extra hours the role required. 8 months of no contact gave me, among other things, a lot of quiet evenings, and I used them. I passed my CPA exam in my second attempt. I got the promotion. I also started talking about my family, carefully, in corners of the internet that felt safe. Not to be public about it, not to go viral, just because I was 31 years into a story that I'd never been allowed to tell, and there's something about telling it, even to strangers, that loosens something in your chest that you didn't realize was clenched. People responded. I was surprised by how many, not just people saying same, though there were a lot of those, but people who would describe dynamics in their own families, and I would read them and feel this strange jolt of recognition. The mother who needed to be needed, the sibling who had learned that performing distress was the way to get resources, the capable kid who had internalized that love was conditional on her continued capability. I'm not the only one. That's not a comforting thought exactly, but it's an honest one. About 9 months in, my mother sent me a letter, actual paper, and an envelope, which I think was deliberate. It's harder to ignore than a text. She wrote that she'd been in therapy, that her therapist had given her a framework for thinking about patterns she hadn't recognized, and that when she looked at those patterns, she could see something she hadn't been willing to see before. That she had favored Cody, not because she loved me less, she wrote, and I read that line 4 times, but because he had always seemed like he needed more, and she had confused need with love, and she had confused my capability with not needing her at all. She wrote, I think I told myself you were fine so I didn't have to feel guilty about how much I gave him. I sat with that sentence for a long time. I wrote back. It took me 3 drafts. I said I appreciated her honesty. I said I wasn't ready for a full relationship to resume. I said I was open to something slow, something with real changes rather than just words, and that if she was willing to earn back trust over time, I was willing to eventually try. She wrote back within a week. She said she understood. She said she understood. She said she'd wait. That's where things are now, between her and me. Slow. Careful. Real, I think, in a way things between us have never been. Now. You want to know about Cody? I didn't engineer anything that happened to my brother. I want to be clear about that. I didn't expose him. Didn't tell anyone his secrets. Didn't go out of my way to undermine him. What happened to Cody? Cody did to himself, with significant help from 26 years of never being told no. The landlord situation, the one that had pulled my parents away from my graduation, resolved, and then another one started. Cody moved in with my parents for what was supposed to be 3 months. At the 2-year mark, he was still there. My stepfather, who had enabled him as long as I'd been watching, started pushing back. There were fights. I know this from my aunt, who I'd stayed in contact with throughout, who would give me occasional quiet updates with no pressure attached. My brother, who had been coddled so thoroughly that he never learned to absorb any friction from the world, reacted to my stepfather's pushback the way he'd always reacted to anything that didn't go his way, with escalation. There were things said that couldn't be unsaid. My stepfather, who was not actually Cody's biological father either, asked my mother to choose. She didn't choose Cody. I don't feel triumphant about that. I want to say that clearly because I think sometimes these stories get told in a way where the person leaving is supposed to feel vindicated when the golden child finally falls, and I mostly just felt sad. Sad for my mother, who spent decades organizing her love in a way that hurt everyone, including herself. Sad for Cody, who was handed a life shaped entirely around his fragility and now has to learn at 30 how to be a person in the world without someone absorbing the consequences. Cody got an apartment. He has a job, delivery, I think. He's figuring it out apparently, slowly. My aunt told me a few months ago that he'd asked about me, that he'd said something like, "I wonder if Nat ever thinks about me." My aunt didn't know how to answer that. She told me and then asked if I wanted to respond. I thought about it for a few days. Here's the true answer. I do think about him. Not in an angry way anymore. More like how you think about a person whose life ran parallel to yours for a long time, under circumstances neither of you fully chose, and you just wonder who they're becoming on the other side of all of it. Whether the person underneath the learned helplessness is someone okay, whether he's lonely. Whether anyone told him that being vulnerable and being manipulative are two different things, and whether he can tell the difference. I didn't send a message, not yet. It might not be the right time. Maybe it will be eventually. What I know is this. I earned everything I have. My degree, my job, my apartment, my peace. None of it was given to me, and none of it can be taken back. I don't lie awake worrying about whether I made the right choice anymore. That phase passed. What I have now is something I genuinely didn't know was available to me for most of my life, which is just quiet. Ordinary, good, quiet. My grandfather, the one whose money funded my education, passed away when I was 19. But before he did, he told me something I've thought about 100 times since. He said, "Natalie, some people spend their whole life waiting to be chosen. Don't be one of those people. Choose yourself first." I was 19. I thought he was being philosophical. Turns out he was being literal. If you grew up being the one who held everything together while someone else got the attention, if you've ever been told, "You'll be fine" as a way of being dismissed, if you've ever stood alone at something that should have had your whole family there, I see you. You were never actually fine. You were just strong enough that they let themselves believe you were. And that strength? It's yours. They didn't give it to you. They can't take it back. Drop in the comments. Have you ever had your family miss something important to show up for someone else? And if you walked away, how long did it take before you stopped second-guessing yourself? I'll be reading every one. There's something I've come to understand slowly. The way you understand most true things. Not in a single moment, but in pieces. Over years, until one day you look back and it's all just obvious. What happened to my family didn't happen because anyone was purely evil. My mother isn't a villain. Cody isn't a monster. What happened is quieter and more ordinary than that, and honestly more sad. They made choices, consistently, over a long time, and those choices had weight. Every time my mother chose to absorb Cody's consequences instead of letting him feel them, she was making a choice. Every time she looked at me handling something hard and decided that meant I didn't need her, she was making a choice. Those choices compounded. That's not mystical. That's just how life works. The part that took me longest to accept is my own role in it. I stayed. For years, I stayed and adapted and found ways to be okay inside a dynamic that wasn't okay. I told myself I was being mature. I told myself family is complicated and you don't walk away from complicated. What I was actually doing was making it easy for everyone to keep going. My capability was a resource they used. My patience was a green light. I don't say that to blame myself. I was doing what I'd been taught to do from the time I was small, but I had to be honest about it before anything could actually change. When I packed those 2 suitcases and drove away, I wasn't punishing anyone. I want to be clear about that because I think sometimes the people around me, and maybe some people watching this, assumed it was a power move, a way to make them feel what I felt. It wasn't. It was just the first genuinely honest thing I'd done in years. I was finally acting in alignment with what I actually knew to be true, instead of what I wished were true. And here's what I noticed. The moment I stopped absorbing everything, the actual shape of things became visible. Cody, without me and without my stepfather's patience, had to encounter reality. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a single reckoning. It was just the slow, ordinary friction of a life where no one steps in front of every consequence. He's figuring it out. That's the best I can say, and I mean it without sarcasm. My mother, who spent decades confusing need with love, is sitting with what that cost, not because I punished her, because I left space for her to see it. The degree I finished myself. The promotion I earned it in the quiet evenings I got back when I stopped spending my energy managing everyone else's chaos. The peace I have now is not something anyone gave me. I built it, carefully, out of choices I finally started making for myself. That's the thing about walking away from a dynamic that isn't working. You're not destroying anything, you're just stopping the maintenance, and then you get to find out what was actually solid and what was only standing because you kept holding it up. I think about my grandfather sometimes. He saw something in me early that I didn't see in myself, not strength in the way people meant it when they said, "You'll be fine." Something quieter, the capacity to be honest, to eventually choose correctly even when it's hard. He left me that college fund not because I was the favorite. He left it because he paid attention. I'm still learning what it means to pay that kind of attention to myself.